Hi everyone, this is Joel, I'm Mary, and we're Seth's parents, and we just wanted to say thank you for helping us. We're just so warmed that you would step forward and try to help us find the murderer of our son and try to find the two that killed him and make the world a safer place. Seth always believed in people helping each other and that the world would be a greater place if more people did, and we are just so happy and from the bottom of our hearts can't say thank you enough for helping us find who killed Seth. Thank you so much.
To Orlando, to Dallas, and so many other places. These tragedies tear at our soul. And so do the incidents that don't even dominate the headlines. Just this past Sunday, a young man, Seth Rich, who worked for the Democratic National Committee to expand voting rights, was shot and killed in his neighborhood in Washington. He was just 27 years old. Surely we can agree that weapons of war have no place on the streets of America.
The parents of the murdered DNC staffer Seth Rich are calling for the public's help to catch their son's killer. The mysterious murder grabbed national headlines back in July. Rich was shot in the back while walking home from a bar near his Washington, D.C. home. Police have yet to name any suspects. Investigators believe it was a botched robbery attempt, but Rich still had all of his belongings on him when his body was discovered. Seth's parents, Mary and Joel Rich, recently announced they are upping the reward to $125,000 to any information that could lead to an arrest.
You've got two people that shot my son twice in the back, and that's someone that'll just shoot him in the back. Think of that. You don't want that with your children, with your family. And we want to bring this to closure. We're not going to stop till I find my son's murderer. He was a young man that was here to help people, and now I need your help, please. We don't know enough. We don't know enough about what happened, and I need everybody's help to bring my son's killers to justice and to make your world safer.
As parents, they're still very emotional and grieving from his death. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange also offered a $20,000 reward for any information on the young DNC staffer's murder. 2 weeks after the fatal attack, Assange hinted the 27-year-old Rich could have been a source to his anti-secrecy publication.
Donald Trump has had a disastrous few weeks. If you look at the polls, he needs a miracle. In the American political lexicon, there's such a thing as the October surprise. The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States, and that our sources are, our sources face serious risks. That's why they come to us, so we can protect their anonymity.
But it's quite something to suggest a murder. That's basically what you're doing.
Well, that others have suggested that. We are investigating to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich. I think it is a concerning situation. There's not a conclusion yet. We wouldn't be willing to state a conclusion, but we are concerned about it. And more importantly, a variety of WikiLeaks sources are concerned when that kind of thing happens.
Now to a Fox 5 exclusive. It's been almost a year since DNC staffer Seth Rich was murdered. Still, no solid answers until now.
Someone shot and killed Rich last July in Northwest. Now, police suggested the killing in the Bloomdale neighborhood was a botched robbery, but online conspiracy theories tied the murder to Rich's work at the Democratic National Committee.
Fox 5's Marina Morocco joins us now with what could be a big break in the investigation. Marina.
Tony, Sean, we are just 2 months shy of the one-year anniversary of Seth Rich's murder. And ever since we learned Rich was a DNC staffer, the conspiracy theories online have taken a life of their own. But today, Fox 5 has learned there is new information that could prove these theorists are, in fact, right. New information from the family's private investigator suggests there is tangible evidence on Seth Rich's laptop that confirms he was communicating with WikiLeaks prior to his death. Now, the question is, why has D.C. police, as the lead agency on the investigation for the past 10 months, insisted this was a botched robbery when till this day there is no evidence to suggest that? The Rich family hired Rod Wheeler, a former MPD homicide detective, to run a parallel investigation into their son's death. Wheeler says he believes there's a cover-up and the police department has been told to back down from the investigation.
The police department nor the FBI has been forthcoming. They haven't been cooperating at all. I believe that the answer to solving his death lies on that computer, which I believe is either at the police department or either at the FBI. I've been told both.
But you have sources at the FBI saying that there is information
For
that
sure.
could link Seth Rich to WikiLeaks?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's confirmed. Actually, I have a source inside the police department that has looked at me straight in the eye and said, Rod, we were told to stand down in this case, and I can't share any information with you. Now, that's highly unusual for a murder investigation, especially from a police department. Again, I don't think it comes from the chief's office, but I do believe there is a correlation between the mayor's office and the DNC, and that's the information that's going to come out tomorrow.
And a full report with the new breaking details and this information will air tomorrow morning on Fox News Channel. Sean?
Between the mayor's office, the DNC, explosive allegations in that report, Marina. Will there be evidence, though, to prove those allegations tomorrow?
Well, Sean, Rod Wheeler, the investigator, assures us Fox 5 and assures Fox News that there's a full report that contains information that will show how many times Seth Rich made contact with WikiLeaks and will show exactly when this communication took place. Sean?
We will be watching. We will be waiting. Marina, thank you.
So people have been trying to figure out where WikiLeaks got the John Podesta emails. Now, everybody in the Democratic Party and the mainstream press says that Russia hacked them. And there's been no proof, zero. And not only do they say Russia hacked them, but Trump is in collusion with Russia hacking our election. They never say how, they just say that. So, last summer, there was a staffer for the DNC shot and killed. 4 o'clock in the morning. They said it was robbery, but he didn't take his watch, didn't take his wallet, didn't take his money, didn't take his cell phone. So it wasn't a robbery. 4 in the morning. So here's what Fox, so people are saying, and then by the way, Julian Assange said that guy was shot. He put out a reward.
20 grand.
20 grand. He wouldn't say he was working for WikiLeaks, and that's where WikiLeaks got the emails from. He wouldn't say it, but he intimated it, right? And then they put out so here's the Fox News. This is what everybody's talking about.
Brian Ainsley and Steve, good morning. Breaking indeed and developing at a rapid pace. Bombshell new evidence of a former DNC staffer you just showed there, Seth Rich, suggests he was in communications with WikiLeaks prior to his murder last summer. Let me take you back. Here in the nation's capital, it was last July. DNC staffer Seth Rich was shot and killed on the way home from a bar in a trendy Northwest neighborhood. Here, police initially saying that they believed it was a botched robbery, but questions remain, with the investigation still open. Now, a year later, according to a parallel investigation by former D.C. police homicide detective and Fox News contributor Rod Wheeler, there's evidence that Rich had contact with WikiLeaks. That evidence on a laptop belonging to Seth Rich, showing he was talking with WikiLeaks. Wheeler says this smells like a cover-up.
I want to find out who caused that man's death so we can put them behind bars. But if there's somebody in politics, if there's somebody in government, whether it's in the mayor's office or anywhere else in the city that's involved, you better believe they're going to be dragged in and questioned.
Wheeler sources inside the police department also saying that they were told to stand down on the case. Police not confirming any of this with us. I've been calling the PIO number here at the D.C. Police Department. That was at 6 a.m. and I have contacts from private crime stories. Nobody telling me anything. We are going to keep hunting this. It's worth noting, guys, at the time of Rich's death, his wallet was not taken, and he actually went to the hospital. He was still alive at the hospital where he died. We know nothing about what may have transpired between police investigators and Rich, but obviously Rod Wheeler looking into it. I've known Rod for a long time, and I know he's been looking into this case for a long time in a parallel investigation. This is simply developing, guys, and we will have more on it later.
Not a high crime neighborhood, right?
Not at all. It's in the Bloomingdale neighborhood, one of D.C.'s, if not D.C.'s most popular neighborhood, with bars and restaurants. Very unusual and shocking when that murder occurred last July.
So the keys are in his computer.
Could be.
That's what we're told.
All right. Thank you very much, Griff.
Well, I like they refer to it as a botched, the police refer to it as a botched robbery. Could there be a bigger botching of a robbery? You didn't take anything. They didn't take his wallet, his watch, or his cell phone, or his money. That's a blue. You could not botch it any more harder. You did kill the guy, though. So you did the worst thing, which is worse than robbery. You killed a guy, but you didn't take anything. Doesn't sound like a robbery. Does that sound like a robbery to anybody else?
No, definitely not.
Why would they call it a botched robbery? Why would they just call it an unknown murder, an unknown reason? You put a name to it, a botched robbery? What indicates that it was a robbery? Not a goddamn thing was taken. So why would it be a botched robbery? That's not a botched robbery is when they steal everything from the guy and they end up killing him. Then it's botched because you're not supposed to kill a guy you're robbing because that's worse than robbing a guy. That's a bigger charge. So that's why it would be botched. Something went wrong, they ended up killing him. You kill someone during a robbery when something goes wrong. You don't kill someone and not rob them. Am I wrong about this?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, usually there has to be evidence that there was an attempted robbery to designate it
Zero
as
evidence.
such.
Why? Here's from Fox News. The family of slain DNC staffer Seth Rich blasts detective over report of WikiLeaks. So the family, they're kind of upset. So this is from this article from Fox News Politics. Said a spokesman for Rich's family on Tuesday said Wheeler, that guy that we just saw, the detective, Wheeler was not authorized to speak for the family, and called assertions that Seth Rich sent emails to WikiLeaks unsubstantiated. Brad Bauman said even if purported emails were to surface, it would not necessarily mean Rich had helped WikiLeaks. Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily mean it, but it would pretty much look like it means it. Wouldn't necessarily, but it looks like it. Come on. Quote, even if tomorrow an email was found, it is not a high enough bar of evidence to prove any interactions, as emails can be altered, and we've seen that those interested in pushing conspiracies will stop at nothing to do so. It sounds like you're trying to discredit evidence that will be found in the future. That's what this sounds like.
Yeah.
It sounds like this isn't what you think, even if you find evidence of it, Bauman said. That's what this sounds like, right? That's effed up. Even if we find evidence, it's probably fake. What? That's what that is. That's crazy. That is crazy that he said that. We are a family who is committed to facts, not fake evidence that surfaces every few months to fill the void and distract law enforcement and the general public from finding Seth's murderers. He put it in plural. Murderers. And that's also interesting. Why would they put it in plural?
Yeah, how would they know?
Murderers? Although Bauman said Wheeler was paid by a third party, so that investigator was not paid by the family. So people are saying, oh, it's the family's own private investigator. That investigator we just saw from the D.C. police, former D.C. police, he's not being paid directly by the family. He's being paid by a third party. The family is named as clients of Wheeler's capital investigations on a contract signed by Rich's father, Joel Rich. So he's being paid by a third party, but there's a contract with Wheeler, that investigator, that's signed by Seth Rich's dad. So you're gonna see people saying that, hey, he's not even the family's in private. He's hired by a third party. He's being paid by a third party. But according to this reporting, the contract for that investigator who we just heard, that contract was signed by Seth Rich's dad. And now they want Seth Rich's family wants that investigator to shut up. An FBI forensic report of Rich's computer, generated within 96 hours after Rich's murder, showed he made contact with WikiLeaks through Gavin McFadden, a now deceased American investigative reporter, documentary filmmaker, and director of WikiLeaks, who was living in London at the time, the federal source told Fox News. What? The FBI forensic report showed that he had been in contact with the head of WikiLeaks? With the director of WikiLeaks? What? That sounds like information. WikiLeaks has decided to issue a $20,000 reward for information leading to the conviction and murder of a DNC staffer, Seth Rich, the organization announced. Assange has not returned a series of recent emails from Fox News about Seth Rich. McFadden, who was considered a mentor by Assange, he died of lung cancer on October 22nd at age 76. Don't smoke. Washington Metropolitan Police Department has no suspects.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Didn't you say this was in a busy thoroughfare? Didn't you say there was like...
Well, it's at 4 a.m.
4 a.m. Now,
but I heard it was just, I'm not exactly sure. We saw in the report where the cops were standing, it looked outside of an apartment building. Go ahead.
Well, we often see that there are video cameras for different homes for security and, businesses.
Yeah, I guess there's no video of it or if there is, it hasn't surfaced.
Yeah, I mean, he was coming back from a bar.
But that's what they say.
They're saying he was coming back from a bar.
At 4 a.m. 4 a.m. Washington Metropolitan Police Department has no suspects and no substantial leads. None. Really? That's also suspect. I can't imagine a high priority murder case for the DC Metropolitan Police Department than this one. No leads? No leads? Sounds like a botched robbery by some amateurs. That's why there's no leads. I'm suspect of that. This is that to me, this is red flaggy all over the place. Metropolitan Police, including the police chief, has refused to discuss the case, despite requests from Fox News dating back for 10 frickin' months. Why wouldn't they want to talk about it? Why wouldn't they want to talk to the press about a high-profile murder that's unsolved? I don't know. Maybe it's their policy not to talk about it. I don't think that's their policy. Steph, what were you going to say before about Wheeler and he?
Well, one thing I will say about law enforcement, though, is that a lot of times when they do an incomplete investigation or they likely got something wrong, they kind of stick to their story no matter what.
Yeah.
And they just don't speak to the press. So there is that factor too, that maybe, just jumping to botched robbery was very incomplete at best. And now they're just
They're
trying to
repeating
stick
it.
to it because that's how they do things.
Okay, so what I read was Wheeler he's quoted saying, "My investigation up to this point shows there was some degree of email exchanges between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks." This is Wheeler, a Fox News contributor, and
he was the one hired, according to the reporting, by Seth Rich's dad, who signed the contract, even though his pay was being or his fee was being paid by a third party. Okay.
And he continues by saying, "I do believe that the answers to who murdered Seth Rich sits on his computer on a shelf at the D.C. police or FBI headquarters. And then he goes on and says this, someone with the D.C. government, DNC, or Clinton team is blocking the murder investigation from going forward," end quote.
Seems like it. It seems like it. It seems like that guy is telling the truth. So he's not an unnamed investigator. He's a named guy. We know who he is. We put his face on the thing. Okay.
And I just read that it was mentioned, I don't know if you said this already, but Seth Rich had been notified that he was going to finally get his dream job and work with the Clinton campaign. He had found that out shortly before his death.
Wow. So the speculation is that he was the connection with WikiLeaks. That's where they got the John Podesta emails. That's the speculation. That's why he was killed. This guy seems to think he has proof of it. This guy being Wheeler, saying that there's proof of emails and that there's proof of. So
and we're still waiting to see it. It has not come to the surface yet.
Right. So we'll see. Julian Assange has definitely wants people to think there's more to this story than there is. He has never been proven to be a liar. Julian Assange. I mean, I'm sure he lies as much as the next person, but I'm talking about through his reporting, they've never been proven to be false. So,
can I just add a couple details because we were talking earlier about it being a botched robbery. Okay, so according to this interview that of his father, he said, "We don't know if there's one person or two people. All we know is that there was some sort of scuffle. His son's watch band was torn or somebody had tried to grab it. That's why they're talking about a botched."
Oh, that's why they're saying it was a botched robbery, because his watch band
and some bruises on his body too. Torn.
But they didn't take it.
It doesn't seem like it says Seth's.
You think
watch
if they
band
wanted
was
that
torn.
watch, you think if they wanted that watch, they could take it, because after there's two of them, and then they killed him.
And you think that if they were going after, like, let's say they were going after the watch, that was their main go-to, they didn't get it, whatever, and then there was a struggle and he got killed, you'd think they would take something. Because now you just shot a guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's still, I mean, again, that's a little bit of an inkling where it's like, okay, there is a torn watch, but that still is kind of like, yeah, but that's still a weird.
There was a scuffle. How do we
Nothing
know,
was taken.
How do we know there was a scuffle? Because he had bruises on his body, or did someone witness a scuffle? Nobody witnessed this.
I don't know, but this article goes on and says
Where's
he was
this article
talking
from?
on the phone with his girlfriend.
Yes,
at the
I
time.
read that too. I read that too, that he was talking with his girlfriend on the phone at the time that this happened, right?
Yes.
And so what did they say? Read it.
That's the only thing that
That's it?
that's a little blurb that I got right then.
And the last people that saw him were the bar he was at. That's apparently the last people that saw him.
Absolutely.
And they said
I
he was
guess-
drunk. They did say that he seemed drunk at least.
Okay,
Really?
so the article that I'm referencing is by Ari Feldman.
And where's it from?
And it looks like it's from News National.
Okay.
And he goes on and says that somebody at the bar said that Rich seemed sadder that night than usual and was offered a ride home, but he decided that he would walk.
Okay, so, maybe there's nothing to this, but if there was nothing to this, you would think that the D.C. police would talk about it more, right? You would think. So there's just a lot of, okay. I wonder also why Seth Rich's family felt a need to hire a private investigator.
Well,
Why did they feel a need to hire a private investigator? Go ahead.
According to this article, and this was published in August 2016, they say that the family does believe that it was it was a random robbery.
That's what the family thinks.
According to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they certainly don't want their son. You don't want your son to be the target of vitriol from the Hillary Clinton campaign, of all those people and everybody who's upset about Trump being president. You wouldn't want those people, now mad at your son, even though he's deceased.
Yeah, well, and
you want to protect his reputation and memory in death. Go ahead.
Well, and I was just adding to that family may or may not have a positive view of WikiLeaks as well.
Right.
I mean,
correct.
so it might be, to them that might be like, oh, he would never talk to somebody like that.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe.
I mean, I don't know the political ideology of them, but
right. Neither do I. So there you go. That's the big story everybody's talking about, and it certainly is interesting to me. I would, I reserve judgment on everything until we see evidence. It would be nice to see evidence.
Wish
right?
the news cycle felt the same about Russia.
I really wish the news cycle felt the same about Russia. Let's have some evidence, because this is what we get now.
I know that you and some of your colleagues from the Senate Intelligence Committee drove over to Langley, Virginia yesterday to CIA headquarters, and you were briefed. Here's the question. And you don't have to provide us with any classified information, Senator. But do you have evidence that there was in fact collusion between Trump associates and Russia during the campaign?
Not at this time.
Well, that's.
I was from last week. Okay. That's what we get. I just want to see evidence. So this is just to reaffirm what we said before. This is from the Wheeler, the investigator. He said, my investigation shows someone within the D.C. government, Democratic National Committee, or the Clinton team is blocking the murder investigation from going forward. That is unfortunate. So that's interesting. That's his assertion. He also from that article, it says the botched robbery theory, which police have pursued for nearly a year, isn't panning out. 2 assailants caught on a grainy videotape. You were asking about that. 2 assailants caught on a grainy videotape from a camera posted outside a grocery mart shot Rich twice in his back, but did not take his wallet, his cell phone, his keys, his watch, or his necklace worth about $2,000. Rich had been at Lou's City Bar a couple of miles from his home until about 1:15 a.m. He walked home, calling several people along the way. He called his father, Joel Rich, who he missed because he had gone to sleep. He talked with a fraternity brother and his girlfriend, Kelsey Mulka. Around 4:17 a.m., boy, what is that? Takes him 3 hours to walk a couple miles? That's a long walk, huh? Why wouldn't you just hop an Uber? Around 4:17 a.m., Rich was about a block from his home when Mulka, still on the phone with him, heard voices in the background. Rich reassured her that he was steps away from being at his front door, and he hung up. 2 minutes later, Rich was shot twice. Police were on the scene within 3 minutes. Rich sustained bruising on his hands and face. He remained conscious but died at a nearby hospital less than 2 hours later. And he concludes in that article, seems that not everyone within the FBI is on board with the Russian hacking narrative and are finally starting to come forward. So you remember this? The guy who said, a spokesman for Rich's family on Tuesday said Wheeler was not authorized to speak for the family and called assertions in the Seth Rich sent emails to WikiLeaks unsubstantiated. And he said even if it was purported the emails were to surface, it would not necessarily mean Rich had help. Remember all that? You remember the guy who said that? His name is Bauman. When we found out who he is, he's a regular Democratic PR spokesperson. Isn't that weird that they would have a PR guy from the Democrat that's a regular Democratic PR guy working for that family, and he's the one saying, remember, I'm like, that's crazy. That is crazy that he's saying that. Even if Remember, he went on to say, even if tomorrow an email was found, it's not high enough bar for a... You don't even know what he's already discounting evidence they haven't found yet. Even if we find evidence, doesn't mean anything. That's a Democratic PR guy saying that. Why would they have a Democratic PR guy saying that if this investigation, if it really wasn't, if this guy really wasn't connected to the frickin' WikiLeaks? Why would he be discounting information that hasn't even showed up yet? How can you discredit evidence that you haven't gathered yet? That's what he's doing, and that guy's a Democratic PR spokesperson. This is frickin' fishy as all get out, baby.
There's a lot of indication that Seth Rich was the DNC leaker. There has been for ages. The fact that Julian Assange was, I think he's done everything but, done a pantomime skit to kind of be like, well, we can't disclose sources. That's, it's like we do not confirm or deny sources. It's a security issue. However, we take threats to sources very seriously, and we're offering a $25,000 reward. And then we have, the former UK ambassador saying that it was an inside source who had legal access to the documentations that actually leaked to WikiLeaks. So, these were leaks, not hacks, according to the CIA veterans. It's all there. And I don't think it's any coincidence that you are seeing such a nonsense story around Trump leaking or classified information to the Russians. When you actually read the content of that story, it's nonsense. And it has been debunked by everybody who is actually in the room. But it is being advanced by unofficial stories. I don't think it's any coincidence that unnamed CIA officials are trying to promote that story when something so potentially explosive around who actually was the leaker of the DNC emails.
So last night, the Fox affiliate for Washington, D.C., the Fox television affiliate, released a story that on its face seemed pretty shocking and perhaps illuminating. They reported that a private investigator retained by the family of Seth Rich had disclosed that there was evidence to believe Rich had been in communications with WikiLeaks. So that story got an influx of attention over the past day or so. People immediately began circulating the story to validate the thesis that they had been advancing for many months now. And if you took the story at face value, yeah, you might believe that your pre-existing beliefs regarding Rich had been validated, but normally what is helpful in these circumstances is to take some time to process the new information, to vet it, to check it against additional sources, and not to jump to rash conclusions about its veracity. But that didn't stop conservative media like Breitbart and the Drudge Report and Fox News from going wild with the story. Sean Hannity has led with it this evening on his TV show.
Welcome back to Hannity. So more on the story of murdered Democratic National Committee staffer Seth Rich, who was gunned down last July in Washington, D.C. D.C. police are officially in charge of this case, but former D.C. homicide detective Rod Wheeler, who was hired by a third party to investigate the murder on behalf of the family, says Mr. Rich was communicating with WikiLeaks before he was killed. Now, Seth's family has been pushing back today, releasing a statement that reads in part, quote, "We are a family who's committed to facts, not fake evidence that surfaces every few months to fill the void and distract law enforcement and the general public from finding." Now, Seth's murderers. Now, the services of the private investigator who spoke to the press was ordered to the Rich family and paid for by a third party and contractually was barred from speaking to the press or anyone outside of law enforcement or the family unless explicitly authorized by the family. Fox News has retained a copy of the contract signed by the Rich family, retaining the services of Rod. He joins us now with the very latest. All right. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the technicality of who hired you. I've known you a long time, Rod. You're a man of honor and integrity. Right. So tell us who hired you.
Well, actually, I was hired by the family, Joel and Mary Rich. They signed the contract. Now, the financial benefit, if there were any financial benefit, and by the way, there wasn't much, that was actually paid for by a third party that I have had very little communication with at all, Sean.
Yeah, all right, let's go through this case. The timeline is fascinating here. As I played in the last segment, Julian Assange, I asked him repeatedly on radio and television if Russia was involved. Absolutely not. Now, believe him or not, he's a guy that WikiLeaks has an 11-year history of never being proven wrong. And all these leaks, by the way, ended up being, a lot of them ended up being published in places like the New York Times. So I guess my question is, when you look at the timeline of this, and 12 days after he was killed, it shows up on WikiLeaks, what did you discover in terms of the contacts with WikiLeaks?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question. And let me clear that up right now, exactly what it was that I found. Now, I have never seen the emails myself directly. I haven't even seen the computer that Seth Rich used. Here's the problem with all of this. I don't even know where the computer is. I checked with the police department. They said they don't know where the computer is, and the FBI. They say they don't have the computer. Now, where did this information come from in terms of knowing or believing, I should say, that Seth Rich could have been in communications with WikiLeaks? There was a federal investigator that was involved on the inside of the case, a person that's very credible. And I'll tell you, let me just say this, Sean. I don't like to suggest things without saying the person's name. But I can't say the person's name because that person would be thrown under the bus. And I can't do that. But this person, we checked him out. We have to check him out. Very credible. He said he laid eyes on the computer and he laid eyes on the case file. And he came across very credible. When you look at that with the totality of everything else that I found in this case, it's very consistent for a person with my experience to begin to think, well, perhaps there were some email communications between Seth and WikiLeaks. Every time I talk with the police department, though, Sean, every time I talk to the police department about the WikiLeaks or the emails, it's automatically shut down. That discussion is automatically shut down.
Well, so we don't know for sure if the FBI or if the D.C. police have any access to these forensics, these emails? Right.
We don't know. We actually have a statement from the FBI telling us to contact the D.C. police. The D.C. police says contact the FBI. Now, which is it? If this is just a murder investigation, first of all, why would the FBI be involved? The only reason the FBI would be involved, just so that the viewers understand, is if this has some degree of national exposure, meaning because maybe it is related to the DNC, and we don't know that. We don't know that for sure. It could have been a botched robbery. But my point is this, Sean, and I've been investigating murders for a while. You have to look at every possibility. You can't just look at one thing and say, well, that has to be it.
Have you ever seen a lot of robberies, which is how they've been looking into this case, where the person has their wallet and their watch after they've been shot and killed in the back?
No, I haven't. Now, that's not to say that that could not happen. But here's the thing, and this is so important. There's been a $125,000 reward out for information pertaining to the death of Seth Rich. Not one person has come forward. Here's one other thing that's going to be startling, and I'm just going to say this right now. I reached out to the police department way back in March when the family first hired me, right, to get involved. I didn't hear anything from the police department for 2 to 3 days. Guess what I learned yesterday from the family of Seth Rich? The police department did not call me back because someone, a high-ranking official at the DNC, check this out, a high-ranking official at the DNC, when I called the police department, they got that information and called the Rich family wanting to know why was I snooping around.
Wouldn't that explain how is it possible that the DNC, when the FBI wanted to look at their computers, was able to bring in their own people? Or that the people that ended up getting immunity ended up being able to destroy their laptop computers? Is there any evidence that he might have been disgruntled at the treatment of Bernie Sanders and the unfairness, and that the fix was in to put Hillary in that position, and maybe had evidence of that?
No, I haven't seen any evidence in that regard. The only thing that I have been able to confirm is that there were some problems that Seth was having on his job at the DNC right before he was killed. And the person listen to this, the person that called the father after I called the police to get information, that's the person that Seth was having problems with at the DNC. So, you know, connect the dots here. It's starting to all come together. So, again, let me just really quickly say this. I don't know for sure. I don't know, as a matter of fact, if the emails went out to the WikiLeaks or anybody else, but it sure appears that way.
All right, Rod Wheeler, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
And what you would have found if you took a moment to pause and reflect before peddling this story is that the story has fallen apart upon the most minimal scrutiny. So, when CNN contacted the private investigator who was retained by the family, he admitted that he had no evidence to suggest that Rich had contacted WikiLeaks. He had no evidence. So the crux of the story, the main reason why this became a story last night, was that this private investigator supposedly had claimed that he had in his possession, which he obtained over the course of his investigation, evidence to suggest communications between Rich and WikiLeaks. But CNN, who interviewed him to corroborate the story, which is basic journalistic due diligence, learned upon querying Wheeler that Wheeler actually had no such evidence. Quote, "I only got that information from the reporter of Fox News," Wheeler told CNN. And the news director of this Washington, D.C. station, TV station, didn't reply to CNN's request for comment. So at this point, people who are promoting this story uncritically, people who are peddling its claims without scrutinizing them very, very carefully, are not only irresponsible, but destructive and odious, because there's no reason at all to believe that this conspiracy is accurate or grounded in anything resembling reality. Now, as with any conspiracy theory, there's always the potential that some information that is actually legitimate could come out corroborating it sometime in the future, but as of now, we have no such information at all. So people who are peddling this stuff are charlatans for the most part. Some might be well-meaning and might just be swindled, but there is just no good reason at all to believe that any of this is accurate. And the people who are lighting up the internet with fantastical claims about this story are doing their audience a disservice, and they are perpetuating bogus theories that just make people who purvey them look extremely stupid. So you can't disprove a negative. You can't say that we know for certain that no evidence will ever come out to substantiate this thesis. But the supposed smoking gun that came out just last night, in which rocketed across social media and rocketed across the conservative media, has no validity. So I just wanted to do a short video on that subject because I've been inundated with people demanding that I talk about it for the past 24 hours. So now I'm talking about it and I'm denouncing it as idiotic. And there you have it. Read the CNN article, which I will link to in the description box, and stop being stupid. So I will talk to you later.
We're going to, of course, talk about the Seth Rich story first. And right before I went on, I saw updated tweets. Anyone following, last night, Michael Tracey, who many view as very credible, made a very short video about the whole Seth Rich story, and as his source used a CNN article, and he basically covered a third of the story. Just as I was about to get on, I saw that he tweeted. He actually responded to a tweet, and I retweeted it, where somebody had said that he basically said that he trusts CNN over WikiLeaks. He did not say that. The person that originally said that, I don't think he was saying that's what Tracey said, but when the overall view I don't want to like throw that person under the bus, but that was the overall view. Well, Michael Tracey clarified it that that's not what he meant, and that he was covering one part of the story. So let's just really briefly look at some of these tweets. So this says, anybody uncritically repeating this conspiracy trash should feel bad about themselves. Now, what's not clear to me is, what does he mean by that? Does he mean, and he said, he didn't say he was going to make another video, but he said that he was talking about one aspect of the story. So my question is, which aspect is it? Is it the Clinton body count aspect? Now, with that, it's a lot of circumstantial evidence. I think a lot of that circumstantial evidence is convincing. But if you want to say that that's a conspiracy theory, while I don't agree with that, fine. What I want to know specifically is, and this isn't just for Michael Tracey, this is anyone giving credence to the CNN story and saying that that somehow makes this all bullshit. Here's the question. If you view WikiLeaks as credible, then how do you explain their tweets about Seth Rich? I don't think it logically follows that a person would view WikiLeaks as credible and then view the entire Seth Rich story as a conspiracy theory. I think WikiLeaks has made it pretty clear that Seth Rich is the leaker. And if you don't agree with that, then my question to you would be, why did WikiLeaks, for example, tweet that they were offering a $20,000 reward to find information about his murder? What reason would they have that? Why in the interview he did, I forget if it was with Swedish television, Julian Assange, all but said that Rich was the leaker. Now you can say, well, he didn't specifically say he was the leaker. Like I said, okay, but then why did he do that? Because was he at some point friends with Seth Rich? Maybe he just saw that a man was murdered and say, oh, this is a sad story. Why don't we offer a reward? That doesn't make logical sense to me. So I would like answers about that. So if you want to throw out the murder part, fine. I'm not saying I agree with that, but we don't even have to argue about that. Do you view WikiLeaks as credible? And do you think, what do you think WikiLeaks meant when they tweeted the shit about Seth Rich? Now, the other issue I had was not necessarily with the video, but just at the end of, well, actually, no, that's not true. The video at the end, he did the same kind of pattern that Emma did, Jordan did, where he attacks, or see, here's the thing about Michael's video. Michael's a smart dude. Michael left himself a lot of plausible deniability. I don't think there's anywhere in his video where he lies. There's a big difference. Now, understand, I'm not defending the video. I don't like the video. I would like a follow-up video that is more detailed. But there is a big difference between the video he made and the video Jordan made. Because in the video Jordan made, Jordan outright lies. He outright lies about H.A. Goodman. He outright lies about Tim Black. Michael Tracey, I cannot find a place in the video where he lies.
But the Washington Post is calling the Seth Rich story fake news now. Link in the description, archived, of course, to this. Isn't the Washington Post the same site that asks for absolutely no real evidence in the Trump-Russia case? Now, I would think extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That is, the more extraordinary the claim is, the more evidence you should really want. The more tangible, less circumstantial the evidence should be to achieve the threshold of believing something. Which one of these is harder to believe? Someone got assassinated for political reasons after leaking documents as part of a cover-up, or the President of the United States is in the pocket of a bunch of fucking Russians? I think the latter requires a little bit higher a threshold of evidence. Maybe not like monumental, but I want something other than James Comey's memo. I want something other than a couple of intel heads of said, Russians tried to interfere in the election. Saying they tried to interfere doesn't mean they succeeded. Even if they succeeded, it doesn't mean Trump was consciously involved. I want more evidence of this. I want to wait until this investigation occurs to see exactly what evidence they have or they think they have. And saying, by the way, WAPO, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, regardless of the site, our sources say Trump is afraid. Our sources say Trump is moving money overseas. Our sources say Jared Kushner has undue influence. Your sources, what are the sources? I understand the concept of shielding your sources when you're a journalistic firm, but if you're not going to conduct any journalism, you just say, oh yeah, an anonymous source that claims to have an anonymous source within the White House who claims to be a friend of James Comey, who claims that he was in on this meeting, says that's a rumor. That's no different from the Weekly World News, the Inquirer, the Sun, or any other tabloid. It is gossip. That is, it is a claim that is being made without evidence. In the Seth Rich case, we have a dead body. We have extremely strange circumstances, even in the original police report. We have someone who's been shot as part of a robbery, supposedly, trying to pickpocket him, who then doesn't actually take anything from him. It makes no sense. The story, the official line of the story, doesn't make sense. It's just like Michael Hastings all over again. With the Trump-Russia stuff, we have a claim made by James Comey and claims made by anonymous sources for the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm sorry, that doesn't rise anywhere near to the threshold of the evidence needed to impeach a person. It barely achieves the threshold needed to actually investigate the situation. Meanwhile, Seth Rich is actually dead. The story actually makes no sense, and all they can say is, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. That term is retarded anyway. But if you want to talk about a conspiracy theory, what about the idea that the President of the United States has been compromised by a foreign state due to its own intel gathering or its espionage or something? I would think it takes a little bit more credibility as far as the evidence goes to believe that than to believe that somebody was killed for political reasons.
They spent $1.2 billion losing to Trump. And then, May 12, 2017, DNC Host Committee gives out nearly $1 million in bonus checks. How much money was raised for a reward to find out what took place in the Seth Rich murder by the Democratic Party? How about $0? Nothing. The DNC gave no money to find out what took place with Seth Rich. Not to my knowledge, at least. DNC Host Committee gives out nearly $1 million in bonus checks. The Philadelphia 2016 Host Committee used some of the leftover money it raised for the Democratic National Convention to pay nearly $1 million bonuses to staff and volunteers, prompting the Republican head of the state Senate to call for an audit. The rewards, which ranged from $500 for interns, must be nice, and volunteers to $310,000 for Executive Director Kevin Washoe. You got a $310,000 raise for losing to Trump? Were paid in November, 4 months after the convention. The amounts were listed in a year-end report filed with the Federal Election Commission on January 31st. So they've been giving out, if we do come out and raise enough money, we will decide what to do with it. But a significant part is bonuses, and I told that to almost everyone we hired. Rendell said Thursday the committee raised $86 million, on which $10 million, the largest amount, came from Pennsylvania taxpayers. If you're a taxpayer in Pennsylvania, are you happy? Your taxes are now going to bonuses.
I'm going to talk about Seth Rich and the conspiracy. Yes, I am calling it a conspiracy. No, I don't mean to discredit anyone investigating this story. But I'll say this, whether or not Seth Rich was the leaker, was the person who provided the emails to WikiLeaks, still does not mean someone had him murdered. So we are looking at a conspiracy theory. But let me rewind a little bit, because a lot of people might be wondering what the hell I'm even talking about. There is a man. He was murdered. His name is Seth Rich. Many people believe that he leaked the DNC emails to WikiLeaks. Now, the reason for this is that during an interview, Julian Assange brought up Seth Rich when talking about the risk his sources take. The reporter said, are you suggesting this person was a source? And Julian said, we can't comment on who our sources are. Many people took this to say that Julian was hinting that Seth Rich was the source and that he may have been murdered for leaking information. Now, it is widely believed by many people, whether it's true or not, that the Russians hacked the DNC and leaked this information to WikiLeaks and was using WikiLeaks as a useful idiot. But a man named Craig Murray, who was close with WikiLeaks, said that he flew to Washington, D.C. to meet with an insider, someone working within the DNC, who provided this information to him and that it was not Russia. Is there a possibility that Seth was the leaker? He was murdered? Sure, I can't tell you what percentage it is. But there's a few interesting things that have happened recently. Fox News put out a story saying that a federal investigator said Seth was the leaker. Now, many people have said to me, I've talked with some journalists, oh, but Fox News citing an anonymous source, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, yeah, okay, hold on. If we're going to look at what CNN and the New York Times are saying about Trump using anonymous sources, why are we going to throw out the anonymous sources coming from Fox News? We can't do that. So then we can say, do we trust Fox News? Well, that's really up to you, not me, right? Many of these big news organizations have been wrong on many stories. If you choose to trust them, that's up to you. And this is the real divide here. Now, there was some controversy when Rod Wheeler, a private investigator and contributor to Fox News, came out and said that there was evidence to suggest Seth was exchanging emails with WikiLeaks. He has since said that he was referring to the Fox News piece, not that he had firsthand evidence of this. In turn, we're hearing that a spokesperson for the family has come out saying there's no evidence, no one knows anything about this, and they want the conspiracies to stop. This has caused a lot of people to call out that spokesperson, saying that they're a DNC shill. And look, this is a really complicated and contentious issue where you've got many mainstream publications, and honestly, there's some journalists that I respect refuting this story, saying it's not true and the family does want it to stop. But something interesting just happened. Kim DotCom recently tweeted out that he knows Seth Rich was involved because he was involved, going as far to say is, quote, I am the evidence. Kim has thrown his weight behind this conspiracy theory, as it were, that Seth Rich was the source to WikiLeaks. So then what does this mean? First, let me say a few things. I did a documentary on Kim DotCom. I've been to his house. I've spoken with him several times. I wouldn't call us friends or anything like that, and I don't know him very well. But I have met him, I have spoken with him, I've had the chance to talk with him about his case and some of these issues. Julian Assange, I have met with him. I don't really know him, a brief meeting at one point, but I know a decent amount about WikiLeaks, and so here's what I want to say before anything. Julian Assange has been detained for 7 years. And one of the reasons many people believe is that the US is trying to extradite him. Sweden was investigating a potential molestation charge. It's a very complicated story. And he ended up seeking refuge at the Ecuadorian embassy for the past 4 years. So he was arrested, put on bail in London, and then, it's a long story, but let's not get into the Julian Assange stuff. Suffice it to say that many people believe the US is involved in his detainment, and particularly through Sweden, Sweden being the main body that's keeping him where he is. Kim DotCom had his business destroyed, his home raided, and his life basically tossed up into the air and just shuffled around by the US. They raided his home at gunpoint. They froze his assets, seized his servers, shut his business down, and effectively took his life from him. So these are two people that really do have a reason to be upset with the United States. So people can say, look, these people have grudges and they're motivated to hurt some of these politicians, particularly the Democrats, the DNC. But that doesn't necessarily discredit them. It does motivate them to be in the field they are. I want to add also, there's been some weird stuff going on. For instance, people believe they found the Reddit account of Seth Rich, and some of his posts have been edited recently. Earlier today, Julian Assange tweeted that WikiLeaks will never reveal their sources. Sources may communicate with other people, but WikiLeaks will never be the official source of revealing their source. Now, a ton of people quickly took this to mean that Julian Assange is once again hinting that Seth Rich is in fact the source, especially considering he used hashtag Seth Rich in his tweet. But what I want to say is that this it's quite the opposite. It's actually a statement from WikiLeaks saying that they take no part in the revelation of who their sources are. That may be the case, it may not be the case, but why is Julian Assange talking about it? Well, before I get into that, I just want to bring up that not too long ago, or I should say recently, Roger Stone commented about having back-channel communications with WikiLeaks, to which WikiLeaks refuted that through a spokesperson. This has led many people to say, if Julian Assange will disavow communication with Roger Stone, why won't he disavow communication with Kim DotCom or what Kim DotCom is saying? And that is interesting, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. It is interesting, and that's where we are so far. Kim DotCom is a very well-known figure with hundreds of thousands of followers, and he made a statement that Seth Rich was involved in WikiLeaks. It would be irresponsible of me as a journalist to ignore the statement from somebody, anybody, who is making the claim. Now, look, if an average person that, no one knew who they were, they weren't a public figure, made a statement, it would still be my responsibility as a journalist to do a Google search. Who is this person? Is there any merit to this? At least give it 5-10 minutes. Kim DotCom, on the other hand, is a very well-known figure with hundreds of thousands of followers, and we need to take this seriously for one reason. If the story is not true, we need to fact-check Kim DotCom. If the story is true, it will have a profound effect on the current state of politics and foreign policy. Right now, there is the general belief that Russia hacked the DNC. But if it does come out, if Kim DotCom does provide proof, actual hard evidence, that would disrupt the whole Russia narrative. I am a journalist. I understand the family is grieving and that this is probably nightmarish for them. I wouldn't wish something like this on my worst enemies. But the impact that this could have on the international community, on our government, on our world, is extremely important, and it would be irresponsible of any journalist to stop investigating a story simply because someone or a family member is upset about it.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as wide.
Bullshit. 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 Bullshit.